Thank you for. Okay, sorry about that, everybody. So yes, we missed the recording at the beginning there, which is my fault. I think it's all that flustered of not having things work at the beginning. So thank you for having my back there to let me know. So yeah, so I used here PowerPoints and I started making drag and drops. So learners can actually manipulate things, move them around, line them up. And I'm not lining these up correctly. I'm just, quite, clumsily moving them around. But so it gives them something tangible to kind of do. And in the classroom, you would have perhaps had all your paper cut out and laminated, and they're doing, physical cast sorts. So for me, maybe in the future, I might do something like this on a whiteboard, on the interactive whiteboard, and get them to come up and actually physically drag in perhaps. But obviously with large groups, I might still go back to using those tangible card sorts, so they have those in groups. But I will do something like this. I will duplicate the slides, and different groups will have them in different breakout rooms. So they'll have the sort of almost identical Jamboard slides, but just for their group, so that they can just work on them as a group. And here's other things I've done. I've done sort of writing frames, if you like, to get them to think about different sources and viewpoints. This is for GCSE, where they can actually be looking at what writers agree on, what they disagree on. Again, this is sort of question 3, paper 2, as an example. And what I've also thought would be quite useful is to show you something that some of my learners have actually done. So within a GCSE class, I had learners split into groups. So we've got group 1 here. You can't see the text very well because when I print screen and then share, it's a bit blurry, but it wasn't so blurry for them. They had source A, they had some quotes in there already. They had an example matching quote for source B where there's a similarity or similar theme. And they had to work through discussing in their small groups, adding in their quotes to show that sort of the similar viewpoint or perspective. Then they came back to the main sort of teaching. We talked about that, we shared them. I then introduced the next part, and then they actually started writing down their lists, so talking about the contrasting ideas. So we're then moving up to the next stage. So it was all just sort of very much structured, but allowing them to have their sort of, their kind of ownership in sort of taking part in that within their groups. And then in the final part of that, we actually got them writing paragraphs. So presenting an idea with a checklist for success. They have an example student answer as well, so something to model on, where they can actually use those quotes, use their ideas, the contrasting ideas, and actually put something in writing. So it's just to show you how I've used it. And those slides are already pre-populated. I literally made a PowerPoint and then took the backgrounds, put them into Jamboard and made it, tweaked them slightly so they had something flexible. So I wasn't doing a massive amount of extra work because they were going into Jamboard and then seeing something that, loosely resembled the slides that they were looking at. Okay. Other things I've done, I use a tablet sort of image I've got off Google. I put a text box in it, and then learners have been able to come in, looking at a text and being able to highlight, for example, quotes that they want to talk about that they can zoom in and they can discuss, and we can kind of analyze those. So this is quite a nice activity to do as a group, and you'll get learners that are more independent learning and more capable, and learners who are perhaps weaker. And this is where obviously they this is quite nice for them because they can do it as a group activity. And I think that has helped, I think, with online learning with some of my weaker learners who've sort of needed to kind of work more collaboratively with others. It's actually, I think it's kind of forced collaboration in some respects. I then moved on from that, and then they've got quotes which are from that text, dragging and dropping their chosen inferences to clear desk area. So some of these are true and some of these are sort of false inferences, and they drag them into the main desk area. Again, this is a discussion that they have. I'm very wary of the time. We haven't got any more. And then the last thing, again, is to then do a piece of writing based on that, of their inferences. So it's all about sort of step-by-step building up. And these are sort of group sort of tasks, if you like. I was going to share a link with a Jamboard. We're not going to have time to do it, but I will put it in the chat anyway. So you can have a little nose through at something that's kind of designed that if we had the time, we would have had a look at, but I'm very conscious that I don't want to take the time away from anybody else. Okay. So sorry, that was a bit of a whoosh running through. I hope there's some things there that were of interest. I would have talked about them a little bit more if we had a little bit more time, but please feel free to write any questions or anything you want to in the chat, and I will share that original Jamboard link as well in just a moment.
Thanks, Holly. I've learned, you know, I know how to use Jamboard, but just seeing how someone else uses it is really useful. Yeah. I've got some great ideas now on how I can expand on what I've been using it for. So thanks for that.
That's all right. Sorry, I realised that I've joined this group and I'm in Hollie's login, so it says Hollie.
Did I call you Hollie?
You did. Don't worry. It's because it's her name. Yeah, it's all right. I've just changed it. Again, it's the technology when you're moving out into another room and it changes. So I hope that's of use to you. I don't want to eat into too much into other people's time. So I'm just going to pass over to, I think we've got Eleanor next. And Eleanor's going to be talking to us about using a mobile phone as a visualiser in GCSE.
Yeah, thank you, Nicola. That was really useful for me as well. Similar to what Shelley said, I've used Jamboard a little bit, but it was really useful to see some of the ways that I could do it, and also thinking about why we should still use it, even hopefully next term when things are a bit more normal. It's still definitely got a place. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen. I'm very sure I'm going to have some of the same issues that we've seen. Okay. So I'm going to just talk quickly through something that I've used over the last few months, which has been sorry, screen just froze there. So I'm just going to talk through something that I've done over the past few months, which I've found useful. I work at Newcastle College and I'm an English teacher, but I'm also a TLA coach at the college. So I've had a role during the pandemic of not just trying to solve my issues in the classroom, but responding to other people's as well, all over the college, not just in English, and thinking of solutions that could work in different ways. But that was very daunting because, like lots of other people, I certainly wouldn't have described myself at all as tech savvy. So I felt like my role developed very quickly into being one of the college sort of Teams ambassadors, having not used Teams at all myself. So that was quite daunting. But lots of I tried to, as I'm sure lots of you did, have a sort of attitude over the last few months of just sort of rolling with the punches. So every time we sort of encountered a new barrier and realised what we were missing, so whether that was flip chart paper, group work, just thinking of workarounds, and then sort of waiting for the next thing to hit, realising what we didn't have anymore. One of the things that I've used for a number of years, which I found really useful in my teaching, is a visualizer, and I don't know if people also use those in a physical classroom, but I've used it in the past in different ways. It's been sort of part of my just standard practice, so I often used it for modelling, especially planning. So for GCSE English, using a visualizer to model planning strategies for an extended piece of writing, or modelling how I would plan how to compare two texts, and doing that live in front of the learners and them contributing to that planning and writing down the plan that we sort of collaboratively made together. I also used it a lot just as a sort of structure to my sessions, where I would do something, then we would do another version together, and then the learners would do one independently, and they got used to that sort of structure in a session, whether it was writing a short response or doing a plan. I've found that once I've embedded that sort of concept, that's you know, worked well for my adult learners. And also I've used a visualizer a lot for live marking, sort of trying to train the learners from an early stage how to use the assessment criteria so that they're more effective in peer marking and self-marking. And I found a visualizer really useful to model that process and make them more confident. But obviously, once we were all at home remotely, I didn't have my visualizer to use. I didn't know how I would get around that issue. So my college very quickly started using Teams as our main sort of platform for teaching, and I found that you can add, if I was teaching on a laptop, I could also add my phone onto the call, so I could then use my mobile phone as a visualizer. And it was surprisingly easy, and I've put this on here. I don't know in your colleges whether you use Teams or whether you use Zoom, but I think the same principle would probably still apply no matter what platform you use, that if you've logged in on one device and then you add your mobile phone as a second device, then you allow to share using the camera. I think the same principle would apply. Anyone that uses Teams, these instructions are here, but you could maybe have a play around with if you use something else and see if the same thing would work. I'm just going to share, I've got a very short video clip. It's about 3 minutes long, of how I've used the mobile phone as a visualizer in a lesson recently. So I've edited it to take out the names of the learners at the bottom, and it just shows the camera. The sort of premise of what we were doing, it was planning and annotating a text to prepare for a language and structure analysis question. So I was trying to use the visualizer to help the learners to make effective annotations on their text and be able to incorporate their ideas more smoothly rather than just using chat. So if I'll put that on, and then we could have a little chat after about what worked and you know, how I was using that. So I hope the sound will play.
Seriously still and mechanical in its tones. Which word there do you think you could say a bit more about if you were going to zoom in on it?
Lost the line.
Still and mechanical, maybe.
Okay, fantastic. What sort of words are both of those, still and mechanical?
They are describing it like a very, they are related and like machine, isn't it?
Sorry, Yonita, what did you say?
Like a robot? Could it be?
Brilliant. So it makes her seem unnatural?
Yeah.
She doesn't seem human, does she? If she's mechanical, it makes her sound, yeah, like a robot, like she's unnatural. Does it make us think she is like gentle and soft, or does it make us imagine that she's like hard and that she's got a purpose for being there?
Can you repeat your question again? It keeps cutting off, sorry.
No problem. So her being described as still and mechanical, those adjectives, does that make her sound like she's dangerous, or that she's gentle?
She's dangerous.
Both of them.
I think dangerous.
Yeah, I definitely agree dangerous with the mechanical bit, that makes her sound unnatural and dangerous. I'm not sure about still that adjective makes me think that she means no harm. She's just, yeah, that's a really good one, Anita. I love that, the unpredictable idea of her. But could you maybe say that those two adjectives contrast?
So
they
one is
contrast with each other, don't they?
But then the other one shows like the dark side of it.
Yeah.
That's why it's unpredictable and dangerous, because she might not be as good as she seems.
Fantastic, love it. So do you see, when we're discussing here, you're getting so much more out of the words. You've got so much more now that you can say. You start your point with a general point about the sensory language of her voice, but you've managed to zoom in, and thanks to Hajar picking them out, you've zoomed in on two adjectives, and you're managing to say more about the effect of those adjectives, and then actually even more, you're contrasting the adjectives and saying how they relate to each other. I definitely agree with Jackie's point there. She seems lacking in emotion. Okay, so we've got 2 points there about language, haven't we? You wouldn't need them both, so you can choose which one you think you've got more to say about. You could either write a point about the pathetic fallacy that the writer uses and how that makes it gothic, or you could start a point about the sensory language, and then you could talk about those adjectives. Okay, so what do we need to do now?
Structure.
Okay, so I'll use a different colour pen. I'll use pink for structure. So, has anyone? Okay, so I'm just gonna let me just stop that playing. Sorry, that was something else that just started playing immediately after on YouTube. But hopefully you could see from there the sort of benefits of having the visualizer. And I'm definitely going to keep using that even in a physical classroom. I think that I could still make use of the sort of modelling aspect in the physical classroom, and also just having the ability to take a photo of a learner's work and then use Teams to show that on the board, and I can live mark things together. I'll just quickly go back to the PowerPoint. I think I've got one more slide. Yeah, so just thinking about the way all of us have encountered problems and we've tried to find workarounds, but then also seeing the impact. And I'm really looking forward to being back in a physical classroom, but there are some things that have worked even better actually remotely than I think they would in a physical classroom. I think things like breakout rooms as well, I've found sometimes even more useful than actually putting them in groups in the same room. And I've had a support worker in my sessions this year working with adults, and when I've been able to put people in breakout rooms and have her in a breakout room and me in a breakout room, that's worked better than it would have in a physical classroom. So I think just taking a bit of time now that things aren't so chaotic to just evaluate what the impact's been of some of these things and work out what we want to keep and what we are very keen to get rid of would be helpful. So yeah, thank you very much for listening. If anyone's got any questions about that, I'm more than happy to answer, and I'll share the PowerPoint so that people can see the instructions and how to do that on Teams.
I've got a question. How have I never heard of a visualizer? I've never used one.
Yeah.
This is a great idea. I've never used a physical one, and I've certainly not thought about using a mobile phone as one. I think it's great. Eleanor, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I've only taught in FE for 2 years, and prior to that I was in secondary school, and that was like they just used that all it was really standard in the school, so I think I just took that with me, and it's something that I sort of knew about, but yeah, I think they're such a game changer in sessions.
This one was about £40, I think, where it was about 33 years ago, but they've really gone up in price because everyone's using them. And this is a Hue one. It's really easy.
They make me think back to those, do you remember the OHTs, whatever they were called? They're kind of a bit like that on them. Used to sort of write on the acetates. When I started teaching, I had only an overhead projector, but it was really good. It had loads of benefits.
Yeah,
and I think this carries on that sort of good practice, doesn't it? Karen, you wrote something in the chat earlier about, maybe have you thought about maybe a stand or putting, supporting your phone on something so it's not quite as jumpy? I've had the same problem as you, Eleanor. I've used a phone with only as like a one-to-one, not with the whole class, because I couldn't find anything to prop it up with. It used to keep falling over when I wanted to get the bit that I wanted to do, and it was a bit jumpy. But I think now you've said, Karen, obviously the price of them, I think it's an investment well worth getting.
I think the stand as well, people have used, they've sent me links for stands from Amazon, which are about £20, like sort of clamp things.
That's a good idea,
like that sort of thing that clamp your phone. Yeah, otherwise, because you've got no hands left if you're holding your phone and then you're trying to write. Yeah, and I do knock my visualizer over quite often as well. So it's very light, but they are good. They're brilliant.
Fantastic, thank you. Is there any more questions for Eleanor?
A question, but I love your conversation with your students there. I like the way that when people were thinking about what they wanted to say, you didn't jump in. There was still pauses because this person was thinking, and probably a delay as well. So it was really good to see the thinking.
That's something I've seen actually a lot in my other role as a coach in all over the college, like people learning to not be afraid of the silence on a call. I think sometimes initially people feel like they have to fill all the silence, and it's the awkwardness of no one talking, but like Steph was saying in the initial presentation, we do have to be aware of the sort of how intimidating it is for the learners as well, and allowing wait time and trying to make it less intimidating, that they don't need to answer straight away.
That's great. Thank you very much, Eleanor. It's really interesting to see how other people have used it. I've seen some YouTube videos, I think, and you might have heard of her, Mrs. Whelan. Might have heard her on YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
She does loads of videos where it's like talking through exam questions, like how to answer them, how to get full marks, and I found those really useful to sort of share with learners as well. But yeah, they're really quite handy, and I think she uses a visualizer for those as well.
Yeah, I've made some videos this year using the visualizer, so just talking through a text just myself, like this is how you might look at the language in this text, or a particular question, and then just sent it as a video.
Fantastic. So lots of really good ideas of things to take forward. Brilliant. Thank you ever so much. That was really, really good. I think we're moving on to Shelley now, aren't we? We've got Shelley is going to talk to us about a flipped exam.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm a Google Meet girl, so I'm going to share my screen. But if it goes wrong again, I'm a Google Meet girl, so I'm not used to it. Before I do, I was just wondering, I don't mind if you interrupt me, if you've got a question or you want to say something, I'm quite happy for you to interrupt. But I was just wondering, Nicola, would you man the chat for me as well and interrupt me if you think there's a really good question, and just stop me? Because I quite like that type of interaction, when I'm presenting, and I hate not seeing that chat. So I'd appreciate that. Okay, so I'm going to try and share my screen. Oh, okay. So what should I be seeing now?
So you click on, you got it? You click on share screen, and then you click on your screen or the window, the application that you want to share.
Right, it's not this one. But I thought I had. Will it change as I'm so sorry.
That's all right. What are you trying to share?
If I can move that down. Sharing this. Can you see that?
Yep, I can see that. Perfect.
Flipped exam.
Yep.
Oh, excellent. So I'm off to a relatively good start. I'm a little bit nervous as well. Okay, so I work for Manchester Adult Education Service, and we teach learners English from pre-entry right up to GCSE. But what I wanted to bring to you today is the idea of a flipped exam. Now, this isn't my idea. It's not groundbreaking. It's not revolutionary, but it's something that I do with my learners, and it is so effective. And the response I get from them is very, very positive. So I just wanted to share with you how I do it and the reasons why. So this is focusing on level 2 functional skills reading. And we still do paper exams. But we were supposed to have been looking at online testing in January, but we went into lockdown, so that didn't happen. But over the last couple of days, I've been thinking about if this would work, if we were preparing them for online, and I think it probably would. There is ways that we could make this work for online tests as well. So what I just want you to think about as I go through to the next slide is what common mistakes your learners often make when completing practice papers. Now, I don't really mean regarding the content of what they're putting. What I mean is the technical sides of it, you know, focusing on the exam instructions rather than what they're writing. And the flipped exam makes the learner the examiner. So the learner gets the opportunity to look at the mark scheme and to mark an exam paper that the tutor has already completed. Okay. So there's various reasons why I do this. First of all, it focuses on specific exam techniques. So it moves away from the learners reading the papers and then answering the question. It's actually looking at how you answer the question, what techniques you use, how you actually physically put your marks on the paper. I've often found that when learners do this themselves, when they're marking it themselves, they actually see some of the mistakes they make, and it makes it real to them why you can't put a circle against your answer rather than a cross. And it makes them see that they're going to actually lose marks for something that doesn't have to happen. But what's really, really good about this, the way this works, is that learners negotiate. So it promotes a discussion and negotiation amongst the learners themselves about why they've given a particular answer a point, or they haven't, whether they've marked it correctly or incorrectly. They get the opportunity to talk about it. So the way I tend to do this is it fits really, really nicely in the run-up to the exam, so quite close to the exam. So you've done all the preparation, you've done the background work, you've done the reading, they've done some practice papers, you've marked the practice paper, you've fed back to them, they've been given their score. So it works really, really nicely, even up to the week before the exam. I tend to shy away from giving them a practice paper right before the exam because I don't feel they get much from that. If they don't get a good mark, it can be quite, soul destroying for them. So it works really, really well right near the exam. Also, it's quite useful if you, as the tutor, has a look at some of the examiner's reports around that particular exam. And then from that, from knowing your learners, from knowing the errors that they're actually making, and also looking at examiners' reports on particular exams, you can then mark the paper so that the tutor themselves becomes the learner. So I would complete an exam paper and I would put a mixture of good things in there and not so good things. And then the learners would have the opportunity to mark it themselves. So the negotiation of the final score. So you know, I'll show you. This is how it would work in practice. So first of all, the whole group, you discuss the process, you discuss the reason why you're doing it, and you introduce them to the mark scheme. It's a real good idea that the learner, that you use an exam that the learners have already completed themselves, that they've had feedback on, so they know the exam, they know the text, they know what score they got, and they've had feedback from it. Also show them the mark scheme, have a look at the mark scheme. You can discuss open and closed questions, what that actually means, and so on. Then hand out the paper that you have completed as the tutor and get them to use the mark scheme to mark it. And what I tend to do is I go round the room. So I'll say, okay, so Charlotte, what mark did you give Peter? And she'll say, I gave Peter 18, and we go right around the room and I make notes of it. And it's quite surprising, the difference in marks from like 12 to 30. You know, there's a big disparity between the marks. And then I put the learners into small groups. Now you can still do this if you're socially, you know, if you're aware of social distancing. If you're online, they can go into breakout rooms and so on. And then they discuss within that group their marks. And you can choose, so you could put people together that have scored high and low, or people that are around that have scored a similar mark for the exam. So this is where they start to discuss the mark and why they've given that mark, okay? And then they have to come up, so you might have a class of 4 different groups, then they have to come up with a final mark that they've decided on. So again, you go around the room. So group 1, what did you finally give Peter? We gave him 21. Group 2, we gave him 24, and so on. Then, as a whole group, we look at it. And this is where negotiation comes in as well. And if I just flip back to one of my previous slides, this negotiation is exactly that. It's a negotiation. And even me as a tutor, and I've been teaching functional skills for a long time, I have actually changed my mind about my idea of an answer by listening to the rationale of the learners, that, you know, what they've actually told me. Well, I marked that correct because of this. So it is a real good opportunity for you as a tutor, but also for the learners to look at the answers in quite detail and talk about it, which is something they would never normally get time to do. Just move that. So then as a whole group, we would look at each question. We'd look at good practice as well. So what's gone well? What did that learner do that you like? You know, what did the learner do that you liked? What did you not like? And then you would come up with the final score for the exam. And for me, it puts the learner, it gives the power back to the learner. It empowers the learner to be able to make the right decisions when they're doing the exam. And I've got some examples here. So this is a question paper. This was number 1. The question was a simple comprehension question. And the answer was 4.9 billion and 1.7 billion. Now those answers were correct, but you can see that there's a spelling error. So some of the learners would have marked that incorrect. So we discussed it, you know, would the examiner still know that, you know, what you meant? If they would, then we'd mark it as correct, because it's not a writing exam, it's not a spelling test. And there's another example at the bottom here. The instructions ask you to put a cross in the box. Now this learner has put a circle, and I get this a lot. These are things that happen a lot in my classes, and this is why I answer that, you know, I write it out as this. So obviously we discuss it, you know, a lot of it's computer marked, so it wouldn't recognize a circle. Just that little thing, just explaining to him how important it is that you read the question. And it's surprising how many people don't read the question. I'm sure I'm not telling you anything that you don't know. But I also asked them to look for evidence of good practice as well. So just an example of this would be that they've answered the question correct, but what the learner has done is they've circled the important words. Now, sometimes in the level 2 with Pearson, they ask for formal or they ask for informal. And if you've had a learner that's done a practice paper and it's been formal, they might not really read that and realise it's looking for informal. So it's about training them to read the question, look at the keywords, and even circling them to highlight them for the learner. Just a little tiny tweak like that can make a massive difference. We could be talking 2 or 3 points, and that can be the difference between a pass or a fail. Yeah, just little things like this one is not relating the question to the reading text, which we find quite a lot. In my class, learners will often provide an answer that is relatively correct, but it isn't really linked to the reading. And it's about getting them to understand that they're not asking you your opinion on something. They're not asking you if you understand what it means. They're asking it in relation to the text. So putting something like this in just reminds them that their answers have to be always relating to the text, because that's the way that the examiner is going to ascertain whether they're a level 2 reader or not. And again, not reading the question correctly. I don't know about you, if you've got experience of this, but this is quite a common one as well. The question actually asks for one statement. This learner has put 2. One of them was correct, but they probably wouldn't be given the mark because they've got an unfair advantage there, because they've had 2 chances to get it correct. So it's just little things like that. And again, we could say, what have you seen so far that might have changed that? Oh, well, we could have circled the key word, which was 1. So you can carry it on as well. And then we've got an example of good practice. Now, I don't know whether any of you use Pearson and Excel, but there is a bit of a question that's worth quite a lot of points, but it needs quite careful planning to get all of those points. So it's just about having a look at something that's quite well set out, quite easy to read, and obviously the good practice, the circling of keywords and so on. Other common mistakes that I've often found that I will include is illegible writing. So I might write the correct answer, but I might make it a little bit hard to read, which, if an examiner can't read the answer, you're not going to get the mark. Spelling errors that change the meaning of the word, completely, using a homophone mistake, things like that. Writing in the margins, a little thing like that, that came up 2 weeks ago. One of my learners, instead of starting on a new line, she carried on into the margin. Now, I don't know how strict Pearson Ed Excel would be with this, but it does say down the side, do not write in this space. So it's just about making them aware and making sure that they grab every point that's available and they don't make silly mistakes. Making changes, there's certain ways you have to make a change to your answer if you want to if you put your cross and you change your mind, there's a certain way you have to do it. So again, highlight that. Writing too much, sometimes I'll do reams and reams of writing and leave the back page blank, and I'd say, what do you think's happened here? They've run out of time. How could they have changed that? How could they have got time back? Well, they wrote all that for that question and it was worth 1 mark. So let's look at how we can, time management. And again, missing whole pages, missing a question. These are all things that have come up quite often. The reason why I really chose this is because of the response I get from the learners when we've done it. It's such a positive experience for them. looking at the questions in a way that they don't normally, looking at the answers, also showing them examiners reports as well. They often break it up. If I can show you. I have got an example of I should go back there, shouldn't I? And I have got an example of an examiner's report, and they're quite useful. That one, no. Oh, I know where it is. It's at the bottom. But can you all see this? Can you see this, Nicola? Okay, so what we've got here,
we've got Jamboard.
Is, have you?
Yeah,
I can see. Yeah, just so I can see Jamboard. I'm nodding and then I'm looking. It's not
right.
Saying, sorry.
So why has that not happened?
Have you just brought up a pop-up window, Shelley?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
If you stop sharing and then reshare, you'll be able to click on what you're looking at. Just showing that particular
Sorry.
thing. That's okay.
Oh, hang on. Stop sharing. Reshare.
Yeah. You should be able to choose it then.
Can you see it now? No.
No, not sharing yet.
Okay. I don't know what to do then. Sorry.
That's okay. So let's take a breath. So when you click on share content,
I don't really have to be honest. I don't really have to show it you. I can just they're there. The examiner's reports are quite good. They will break down the question and they will often tell you the pitfalls that learners are falling into. You know, we find that learners learners are not doing this, or they're doing more of that, and that's affecting the score and so on.
Would you do this with GCSE?
I don't actually teach GCSE, but I think personally this can be adapted for any exam, even the lower entry exams. I really do. I mean,
I think that's such a good point. Years ago, I used to do this with exams that the they give you the sample answers, and it was so good. And I think I stopped because it took like a 3-hour lesson. It easily took one whole 3-hour lesson, and I just felt, oh, it's too much time. But it is valuable, isn't it? I remember how people were really absorbed in trying to work out what was good in an answer. So I suppose you could maybe not even do the whole exam. You could do like the reading questions or something for the.
You could pick out questions that they're struggling with and put them into groups. You know, so you could even have groups feeding back on that question. So you could split up the questions between the groups and give them each a couple of questions, and then they do this process and feed back on it to everybody.
I've done that.
Sorry. Stop share. I'm just saying I'm going to stop sharing.
I've done something similar with you know, when they get the grade descriptors in the mark scheme for the GCSE paper, and what I've done for a particular question when we've introduced it and we've gone through how to the process of answering and all the rest of it, I've given them the grade descriptors as student, student A, student B, and I've got them to pick out, what's good about it, how could it be improved, the same way that we would do the what well and even better if. And then I've got them to then look at the mark scheme and try and work out where they think it fits on the mark scheme. So getting them to actually interact with the mark scheme and to understand, where a example piece of work would go, helps them reflect upon their own work and what do I need to do to move up to the next band. So I found that quite useful. It's encouraging that ownership as well. But yes, and some great insights there. Thank you, Shelley.
Yeah, it's really good. Thank you.
So Charlotte's written. Sorry, Charlotte, go ahead.
I'll just before you stop, I just wanted to know: do you give them the examiner's report at the start of the session, or do you give them just the mark scheme? Do you give them both?
I'd give them both. I'd talk about it. Yeah, I'd give them both. I'd make sure that they feel well equipped going into it. Yeah, definitely.
Right. Okay.
Because they take a bit of time to read, don't they? I think.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
I'm thinking, you could even flip that part. I suppose they could look at the mark scheme, maybe have some questions on it. So just to get them reading it, and then they're ready for that when they do the exam.
Yeah, but remember the mark scheme. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but when we do practice papers and I give them the feedback, I always give them the mark scheme as well. So hopefully they've had a look at it already. They're used to the mark scheme. They're just not used to it to mark, using it as a themselves for marking a paper. So I would definitely use a paper that they've used before, that they've had feedback on, that they're quite knowledgeable about, and that they've had the mark scheme for. But yeah, you'd still go through it again at the beginning, looking at the open and closed questions and how they can use the possibilities and stuff. Yeah.
Thank you, Shelley. I found that really interesting. It's made me think a little bit about how to do things differently. Some of the stuff you've sort of shared, I'm like, yeah, I do that. But there's the stop bits that you're talking about at the beginning. I'm thinking, well, why don't I do that? Why am I not doing this? And it makes you sort of reflect on your own practice and think, well, actually, let's incorporate some of that. It's been really insightful. So thank you so much, Shelley. That's been really, really good. And thank you to Eleanor for your input as well. Some really great teach meets this morning.